Most villains in the Breaking Bad universe are exactly how you expect a bad guy to be, either cold and calculated like Gus Fring, or completely unhinged like Tuco Salamanca. And I would even argue that Walter White has a place on this list as well. But what nobody was expecting from the spin-off series about the funny lawyer was one of the greatest villains of all time, Lalo Salamanca.
Hey guys!
And this scene alone shows you how remarkable Lalo is. This man is so comfortable in every situation that he literally makes everyone in the show, and even us as viewers, really uncomfortable. I mean, this is a guy who actually died with a smile on his face. And if we're being honest with each other, if Better Call Saul came out first, we would have definitely seen Lalo in Breaking Bad. But I digress, because I'm not here to talk about how he was consumed with chasing Gus or even his inevitable downfall. But in this video, I wanted to go over how genius Lalo Salamanca's introduction was in the Breaking Bad universe, and how a single throwaway line gave birth to one of the best villains in television history.
Lalo didn't send you? No, Lalo!
Who?
So the very first time we see Lalo is in the kitchen at the usual taco shop headquarters where the Salamanca crew discuss business. And we see him humming and dancing along while making food like he's always belonged there. And he must have made some impression, because when Nacho comes in, both Crazy 8 and the owner of the shop are just sitting down and letting Lalo do whatever he wants. And even when Nacho walks in the back to see what's going on, the way he would introduce himself is to offer Nacho a plate of food and talks to him like he was the one that placed an order for it. But it would just be a way to get him to lower his guard. And as Nacho wonders who this guy is, Lalo's assessing him with his eyes and probably making him uncomfortable by being too comfortable in that situation. And this right here is what I love about the guy, because without even a proper introduction, Lalo was able to send chills down Nacho's spine. And this may be a reach, but he even predicts Nacho's fate by saying,
Te vas a morir.
And most likely he was talking about the food, but that's a really weird choice of words to use, especially when first meeting somebody. And as Lalo is so chipper and happy to be there, Nacho's demeanor could not be more opposite. Because just when he thought he was able to start planning for an exit strategy from the cartel business, Lalo comes in to remind him that he's not going anywhere. And this is why his introduction is so genius, because Lalo's presence doesn't feel like a late addition to the show. Instead, it feels like he was a missing puzzle piece that completes the full picture. And to think, he wasn't even supposed to exist, because remember, the origin of that character comes from one line in Breaking Bad when Walter and Jesse kidnap Saul. And while he's on his knees in front of a shallow grave, he says to him,
Lalo didn't send you? No, Lalo!
Who?
Oh, thank God! Oh, Christ!
And at the time, that line held no significance. It was just a throwaway reference. But then, fast forward a couple years later, and we can finally put a face to the name of the person that even scared Saul Goodman well after his death.
Lalo said he was coming back.
He is not coming back.
But the introduction of Lalo Salamanca doesn't just end with that one scene, because we get a deeper insight into the character as he pays a visit to his uncle Hector. And just like his first scene when meeting Nacho, his behavior is yet again warm and polite. And with the Breaking Bad villain, you might expect him to announce his presence like Tuco with loud music and screaming, or study you with a tight gaze like Gus, but nope, not Lalo. He just strolls into the nursing home with a charming and friendly smile that might catch anyone off guard. And, well, that's the trick, because us as the audience are so used to the unhinged behavior of the Salamanca villains that Lalo's behavior actually makes us lean in. And on the surface, this scene looks like just a nephew visiting his uncle and reminiscing about old times. But when you hear the actual conversation, he's reminding Hector of what he considers to be a good family memory, which was when a hotel manager insulted Hector, and in response, he tortured him in front of his wife, and as Lalo puts it, he took his time with him. And he even burned the entire place down. But the one thing that was able to be recovered from the wreckage was a single bell. And while a normal person would try to forget something like this, the Salamancas take pride in their destruction. And this would also give the bell its own backstory, which is not just Hector's primary method of communication, but also a keepsake given to him by arguably his favorite nephew. But what's even more terrifying about this conversation is that it's not just for Hector, because we see Lalo say all this in front of Nacho as a very strategic move, and showing him a glimpse of the darkness underneath that smile. And from a storyteller's perspective, it makes us call into question what exactly Lalo's capable of. And this simple encounter suggests a lot of things and gives us a whole new perspective on Hector. First off, we see that there's someone that even he respects and listens to. Now, some might think this is only because Hector is paralyzed, but honestly, the sheer frankness between Lalo and Hector makes me think that out of all the Salamanca kids, he has got to be the oldest and likely spent the most time with his uncle. Secondly, Lalo's intro shows us that the new leader of the Salamanca family is here. And while the rest of them were just ruthless psychopaths, this one knows how to hide it behind a charming smile. And side note, I have to give credit where it's due, and that's of course to the brilliant performance of Tony Dalton that brings this character to life and makes Lalo Salamanca so legendary. Because before joining Better Call Saul, he was already famous in Mexican TV and cinema, and he has the exact charm needed for the character being charismatic with a slightly terrifying edge. And sure, Lalo might be a complete psychopath, but Dalton played him in a way that made you really like him, which was exactly what co-creator Peter Gould was going for, saying that they wanted Lalo to stand out from all the other Salamancas, but be smart enough to go against Gus. And when Dalton was cast, he was praised as being a guy with movie star charisma, athletic, charming, and of course layered in his performance. And you see that with every second that he's on screen. And even when you see Lalo smiling, his eyes always seem to have that calculating vibe to them, making you constantly second guess his intentions. And you never know if he's going to offer you a drink or simply slit your throat. And not trying to glaze too hard, but I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that Tony Dalton's acting as Lalo is one of the greatest villain performances in modern television. Because this role could have just been a minor side character, especially considering that he came toward the tail end of season 4. But Dalton's performance made Lalo the beating heart of the storyline from that moment forward. And when you really think about it, it's kind of Nacho's fault that he even came in the picture in the first place. Because after Hector's stroke, which he did cause by the way, it forced him to be stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, unable to speak and barely able to move, which would leave the Salamanca territory at risk. And not having complete trust in Nacho to do right by the family, Lalo steps up in order to maintain the Salamanca's role in the cartel business. Because I think it's safe to say that he's a perfect blend of all that the Salamanca family represents. He's devious like Hector, unpredictable like Tuco, and terrifying like the cousins. But for all the similarities to his family, he has a way of blending in with normal people that none of the other Salamancas could do even on their best day. But although he can be civilized, he still has an unpredictable nature that can make you question where you actually stand with him. Take the scene with him and Nacho when he's about to introduce him to Don Eladio.
And if he doesn't like me?
You'll be fine.
And when Nacho asks, what if he doesn't like me? The look on Lalo's face says that he's likely seen firsthand what Eladio did to people he doesn't like, and there's a split second that he believes that Nacho won't survive the introduction. And that's right before Lalo praises Nacho for everything that he's done so far.
Hey, don't think I don't see you, eh? I see you. I do.
So if you were in Nacho's position, you wouldn't really have the most confidence that Lalo has your back. And it shows that his loyalty is to his blood family and the cartel. And if you're not one or the other, well...
You'll be fine.
But going back to Lalo in Albuquerque, we get our first real glimpse of how he operates when he meets Gus. But unlike when Hector or the twins came to Los Pollos Hermanos, it seemed that Lalo was there for the chicken. And he even played the role of a gleeful customer to match Gus's persona as the restaurant owner. And I just love his reaction when he finds out that he's talking to Gus.
I am the owner.
Really? How lucky for me.
And when going into his office to talk in a more private setting, he thanks Gus for saving Hector, but he would also dig a little deeper as to why he would save him considering their history with each other. And even with a playful smile on his face, his eyes are trying to pierce through the facade that Gus puts up. Because from the stories that Hector told him, Lalo has had his suspicions about Gus from the very beginning. And as their conversation goes on, he knew that Gus was someone who was openly hated by Hector. And with him being an outsider, he always felt he had a little too much independence in the cartel business. And knowing all this, he would continue to subtly pry into what makes the Chicken Man so special and looking for any weaknesses he could exploit. And even making small jabs towards Don Eladio and downright mocking the boss to see if Gus would give away something that he can use against him. But no matter what Lalo says, Gus stays respectful towards Don Eladio and politely declines his offer to team up. And when he was unable to get Gus to even bend slightly, he plays it off as a joke before leaving and once again complimenting his chicken just to leave on a positive note. But this conversation would confirm Lalo's suspicions that even though Gus appears to be loyal, there's definitely something that he's hiding. And from that point on, he spends his time watching how the Chicken Man runs things. And although Gus thought he understood the Salamanca's way of life, he would have no idea just how driven Lalo would be to figure him out. And what makes Lalo's position so unique is that he came to Albuquerque because he wanted to. And with him already having the respect of Don Eladio and Juan Bosa, they let him do whatever he wanted. And it shows the very stark contrast between Hector and Lalo. Because while Hector displays the old guard of the Salamanca family with a reputation of pure fear, Lalo represents evolution. He's flexible, with a progressive mindset to think outside the box, and not to mention that he has a way with words that can smooth out any tensions before resorting to violence if it serves his goal. And in Better Call Saul, we watch in real time how Lalo goes from a laid-back enforcer to an unpredictable threat. And because he not only possesses the larger-than-life energy, but also intelligence as well as patience, he's able to be one of the only people to find out about Gus's super lab. And it's really how he figured it out that makes him such a great antagonist. Because after noticing panic around the chicken farm, he tracks Mike Ehrmantraut to a travel wire where he finds out that Warner Ziegler had just wired money to his wife. And that small detail gives Lalo everything he needs to get one step ahead of Gus, even if it's just for a moment. Because after Mike leaves the travel wire, Lalo walks in and he tries to pressure the clerk to show him the cameras. But when he refuses to cooperate, while the clerk is on the phone, Lalo climbs through the ceiling in record time just to drop out on the other side and hold him at gunpoint. And even though we don't see the murder happen, we do see the aftermath of Fred's body curled up in the corner while Lalo very calmly reviews the cameras himself. And this moment is shocking for simply how nonchalant Lalo was in this situation, and showing us that for him, people are just obstacles in his way, and his value of a human life isn't particularly high. And once he got what he needed from the travel wire, he even burned down the entire building just to erase any evidence of him being there. And although he wasn't able to get to Warner before Mike, his name bounced around in Lalo's mind for months until he decided to travel all the way to Germany just to charm the now widow of Warner Ziegler. And through a night of drinking and small talk, he was able to learn more about this mysterious engineer that Gus hired. And this alone proves how far Lalo would go just for a simple clue. And he got it in the form of a paperweight. And with that, he was able to track down one of the other construction workers that Gus hired. But this is where things get dark. Because while posing as a lost tourist, Lalo confronts Casper with a gun. But when he runs into his shed, things backfire when he hits Lalo with the broad end of an axe and breaking one of his ribs. And he could have ended the smooth-talking Salamanca right there on German soil, but he made the mistake of listening to what he had to say. And while hiding a razor blade behind a business card, he was able to slice Casper's face and using the same axe to chop off one of his legs. And while giving him his belt to use as a tourniquet, he just says that they're gonna talk. And the shot lingers on the axe dripping with blood. And again, although we don't see it, we can all make the educated guess that Lalo tortured him for information before killing him, because the next time we see Lalo, he will be washing the laundry from a storm drain. And step by step, he pieces together the existence of the super lab. And at any point, he could have called the cartel to come check it out themselves. But for Lalo, he enjoyed the thrill of the hunt, and he wanted Gus to know that it was him that was going to take him down personally. But the way he treats his allies wouldn't be too dissimilar to how he treats his enemies, something that Nacho would be all too familiar with. And because he's basically working for Gus and Lalo, he had to walk a tightrope to ensure that his loyalty was never questioned by the Salamancas. And this meant him doing anything he could just to prove himself, from putting his freedom on the line just to save some product, to literally burning down Los Pollos Hermanos. But even after all that, Lalo still didn't trust him enough to even pick up his bail money.
What about Nacho Varga? Right? Would your competitors notice him?
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's good for a lot of things. But with $7 million?
But enough about how Lalo goes after the bad guys. Let's talk about how his interactions with the Paragon of Justice are and dissect two scenes that are truly terrifying for both us and our favorite lawyer, Saul Goodman, which coincidentally happens after he brings Lalo his $7 million bail money. Because after explaining the delay that had him held up, Lalo would find something off about Saul's story. And when finding his car filled with bullet holes at the bottom of a ravine, he goes to Kim and Jimmy's front door to hear the story again.
Tell me again.
I ran out of water, so I had to drink my own pee.
And after inviting himself in, you can immediately feel the tension in the room. But while Kim and Jimmy are uneasy about him being in their home, Lalo is as chill as can be, and he starts walking around like he owns the place. But when he sits down, he makes sure to show his gun while asking Jimmy to repeat the same story multiple times and hoping to find a hole in his story. And although Jimmy was completely terrified at Lalo's questioning, he kept his story consistent every time. But when it seemed that the pressure was getting to him, we see Kim step in and set him straight, and even making a convincing argument to get him to leave. Now, I gotta be honest, when I first watched this scene, I was legit on the edge of my seat, and considering that Kim wasn't even mentioned in Breaking Bad, I thought something would have happened to her for daring to speak out against the Salamanca. Because all I'm saying is, Tuco beat Nodos to death for just speaking, period. And with how unpredictable Lalo is, who knows what he would have done to her at that point, especially considering that he's literally out on bail for murder. But luckily, Lalo never lost his temper, and he simply left without a word. But unfortunately for them, that's not the only surprise visit that he'll have. Because midway through season 6, and after it was all but confirmed that Lalo Salamanca is dead, Kim and Jimmy decided to sabotage Howard's life for basically no reason. And let me just say, after something like this, honestly, there's no coming back for him.
Julie, you got the wrong envelope.
That was the only one on your desk.
Look again.
And just as they're being confronted by Howard for destroying his reputation, they're interrupted by Lalo, who walks in like a ghost into their apartment. And with Howard caught off guard and unaware of the danger that he's in, he maintains his composure and brushes Lalo off as just another one of their clients. But to Lalo, he's irrelevant. and he casually twists on a silencer to his gun, and without any hesitation or any type of warning, he just shoots and kills Howard right in front of Kim and Jimmy. And this single death changes the course of the entire show. But for Lalo, Howard was just collateral damage. And even though he just committed cold-blooded murder, he barely acknowledges the dead body in the living room, and he's more occupied with sending Kim on a mission to kill Gus. And if it wasn't for the gun in his hand, his nonchalant attitude would give off a vibe that he's just telling her to pick up some takeout. But after what they just witnessed, they know that Lalo is not joking. And in that moment, the thrill of beating Howard completely vanishes from Kim and Jimmy, and the reality sets in as they realize the price of being a friend of the cartel. And this scene shows how ruthless Lalo actually is. He doesn't bother with warnings or threats, and he can still have the warm and charming persona, but with a gun in his hand and a dead body in the room, it's hard for anyone to be as calm as he is.
Okay. Let's talk.
But all good things must come to an end, and our favorite villain story concludes in the very next episode after killing Howard and giving off this kind of angel and demon symbology. And to add to the metaphors, let's just say that the lab is a kind of purgatory, because that's where Lalo not only died at, but him as well as Howard is buried underneath it. But how could someone as cunning or strategic as Lalo meet his end at the hands of Gus? Well, similar to Walter White, ego plays a role in his downfall. Because after Lalo essentially won, he decides to record a confession from Gus to give to Don Eladio. But even when Lalo has the upper hand, due to his playful nature, he chooses to enjoy the moment instead of finishing it quickly. And this side of his personality ends up costing him his life, because Gus plays on his ego and will use it to seize a small window of time to fight back. And this is where we see something truly remarkable, a hint of genuine fear as Gus keeps trying to shoot Lalo even after running out of bullets. And you can definitely understand why he feels that way. And at that moment, he was just basically praying that Lalo was dead, because if he wasn't, there was nothing that he could have done to stop him. But after turning on the lights and approaching him, he's seen that Lalo was hit in the neck and is choking on his own blood. And as Gus stands over him in victory, in his last moments, we see him smiling even in the face of death and securing his position as the most unforgettable villain in the Breaking Bad universe.